Perfect. Recording is in progress. Hello, everybody. We are conducting a resume and cover letter workshop here at the Llama Library as part of the SOS workshop series for career readiness. And my name is Angela Coloredi McGough. I work in the Employment Prep Center here at Kapiolani Community College. And I am here to share some information with you. So what we'll be doing today is talking about resume purposes and types, 3 areas that you can use to review your resume. We're going to actually work through a resume example, and you'll learn how to tailor your resume by each heading. We'll talk a little bit about references and the cover letter, and again, how to tailor your cover letter, and then discuss our next steps. And as always, when we're here in the workshop, we would love for you to complete an evaluation. So people at home, you can take this pop quiz on your own. The answer is true or false. Resumes are the most common document requested of applicants in job searches. True or false? Resumes are business letters that describe your education, work history, certificates, and other accomplishments and skills. True or false? All resumes should look the same. True or false? You must include a resume objective or career summary statement on your resume. And finally, the last true or false, you can include your honors or awards on your resume. So let's see what your answers were. So yes, resumes are the most common document requested of applicants. It is not a business letter. It is a document that summarizes these areas. They should not look the same. There is a standard format, but you have your own personality. So you can actually work your resume to look a little bit differently depending on the industry that you're applying to. It can include a resume, objective, or a career summary statement, and it also can include honors and awards, but it is not required. So besides using your resume for jobs, what do you know are the other purposes of a resume? Great, so hopefully you've been thinking about it, and the answer is for lots of stuff. So you're basically using your resume to share what you're good at and to share what things you can tackle. So when you submit your resume to anybody, it could be for a scholarship, it could be to your recommender, it could be, at a networking event. This is an example of just showing what you have to offer. We're going to talk about different types of resumes, not including the federal resume, which looks very different from the resumes we're discussing. So the first is a chronological resume. This describes your work experience, specifically in reverse chronological order. And this is the most common that people are familiar with. The pro is that it shows a work timeline. So if you've worked up from, dishwasher all the way to general manager, that's a pretty awesome work timeline that you would demonstrate through a chronological resume. However, if you have switched jobs, changed employers, worked in other industries, there may be gaps in your employment, and the chronological resume won't tell that story for you. Conversely, you might use a functional resume. So this is the kind of resume where you have a heading and then the skills listed under that heading. And this focuses, of course, on the things you can do, your skills and your abilities, and not a timeline. However, it must be relevant to the job. So you might have a ton of skills, but you really are focusing only on the functional aspects of your job that you're applying to. However, without dates, this could be a red flag to an employer. So we recommend using a combination. So this includes your work history, your skills, your dates of experience. And one thing we want to be aware of is not being repetitive or cluttered. So your resume, I always say this to my student appointments, that your resume has only a certain amount of real estate space. And so we want to use it most effectively. And one idea to do so is to use the job description. So here is a businesswoman taking a look at your resume, and she decides, yes, we're going to offer you an interview. So how does that happen? There's, first of all, when I was in a staffing agency, I was working with recruitment and outreach recruitment and then staffing for temporary jobs. And so when I reviewed a lot of resumes at a time, the first thing I would do is put them into piles. So the first pile was a definite yes, I want to interview this person. They meet all the qualifications. The second pile, of course, is no, they don't meet the qualifications, or for whatever reason, this resume doesn't, it just doesn't fit with the job I'm trying to place the person in. And maybe, so this person, it's possible, but they're not a definite yes. And so what would happen with my no's and then eventually the maybes that I didn't get through is that my boss would tell me, go ahead and put those resumes in the file. And in the letter that I would send to the applicant, I would specifically say, thank you for applying for the position. While we were not able to interview you for this position, we will keep your resume on file. And so I like to tell the story of learning, where is this file cabinet? This is paper, right? So opening the file cabinet, and there's a bunch of folders in there. She goes, okay, just put it in there. And I said, okay, are these chronological? Are they alphabetical? She goes, nope, just put it in there. And so I recognized that on file truly meant we're keeping it in a file somewhere. It could be a digital file, but essentially this is where we were putting it. We were not really going to look at them again. So these are the areas I would be looking at. So the first thing I notice is the format of the resume and the language that the person is using, and then the content. So when you're reviewing a resume, when you print out your resume, you want to actually look at it, or you pull it up on your laptop or your desktop with nothing around it. So what's the first thing that you see? What stands out to you? Now you want to imagine you're like me, you're an employer. This is your 30th resume, and you're basically taking 2 minutes per resume. So when you look at it quickly, would you offer yourself an interview? This person is tired, and you want to make this resume as clear as possible. So again, we're looking at formatting, overall presentation, language, and content. Let's try an activity here. So there's a full-time clerical position opening at the school where this person currently works. His boss asked him for a resume, and here's what he's starting with. Now, take a minute to look at this resume, and if you're watching on a video, you can actually pause it. I want you to think about how you would improve this resume. But first, what is the first thing that stands out to you? Many people say the name. The name is the first thing that stands out, or the photo. What else might you look at? The objective. So this person wants to find a good paying job that fits into their schedule. Not really a great objective if you're trying to impress an employer. There's this line here. So back in the day when we used to make copies of our resume, there could be issues with the copier, and they would put these lines. The email, you definitely notice that. And then when you're kind of looking at this, you can see that there's not a lot of description, and it's not really standardized. There's a lot of issues. So let's try to work on this together. First of all, what you don't want to do is use photocopies. You want to print it clean every time. This is good if you are going to a career fair or if you're going to a networking event. You don't want to print it on colorful paper, so something that's too dark and difficult to read. And you don't want to use so many colors in one resume. Avoid using graphics unless you're a graphic artist or designer. Then you would probably have a portfolio. So the resume itself should be pretty bland. In the United States, we don't use a photograph. So if you do have a photograph, I suggest you remove it. There are a few exceptions. For example, in entertainment industry and sometimes in real estate, they would like to see your photograph. But for those are very specific careers. For everyone else, they do not and probably should not be looking at your photograph. Avoid strange fonts using everything, like the whole resume in caps. I have seen that. Although you might not have a lot to put on your resume, avoid putting your name in like huge letters to take up space. Avoid uneven tabs or even bullets that are misplaced. So if you look at the bullets in this presentation on this slide, they're all different, right? They all look kind of different. Not enough white space if things are crowded. So let's take a look here. So this person has now used these resume don'ts and changed their format. So there's no photo anymore. That's a good check. And you can see that they don't have that strange font. So now which pile would you place this resume in? For a clerical position, folks pretty much say maybe or a no. So again, it goes to that circular file. Let's keep looking. We're going to move on to language. So what are the things that you want to avoid in professional language? So this email address is not a professional email address, and we want to avoid using something that can be confused. So I typically recommend you use your hawaii.edu, which communicates a lot to the reviewer. We want to avoid spelling things wrong or having incorrect grammar. We want to avoid abbreviations, acronyms, and or specialized terms. So if you know exactly what KCC is, as an example, other people might not. So they might think you're talking about Kansas City College or Kauai Community College. So we don't want to overuse acronyms that folks may not be familiar with. You don't want to use present tense and past tense, in different places in the resume, especially in the same job description. You can use them if you're working currently in a position, you use present tense, and previous positions use past. But my recommendation is just keep one tense, either choose present or choose past. It's just easier for the reader to discern what it is you're trying to say. So now Kaimana Hila has looked at their language and they have changed it up. So they are using their hawaii.edu. They are seeking a full-time position as an administrative assistant in an educational setting, which is great. They've changed the description, so not just watching kids anymore, they're actually caring for elementary school children. And you can actually see that they have continued to do spell checks. So instead of Pear City, which it said before, Leeward Community College Pear City, now it says Pearl City. So that's an example of a spell check that passed. Pear is a real word, but we were meaning to say Pearl. So now, where would you place this resume? So many people say it could be yes, and there are still folks that say, maybe. I feel like it might be missing just something else. So let's talk about what those something else's might be. In the content, you want to make sure it's in reverse chronological order, so the current position or the newest position should be first. Be descriptive. So if it's too vague, you don't want your reviewers to not understand what you're trying to say. And the same thing with missing information. So if you have specific education, certifications, training, or skills that you've used, you want to include it all, especially if it's relevant to the job. Same with industry knowledge. So you really want to think about all of the things you know that are related to the job. And so now Kaimana Hila has redone their resume. They've looked at the content, and you already can see, I think this is well done. So if you're watching this on a video, you can pause it and take a look at the differences between the first one and the final resume. The first thing that I recommend all people to do is to pull out the job description. So when you're applying for a specific job, you need to make sure that everything you have on your resume matches the minimum education and qualifications. you're going to have more than one resume. So I highly recommend that you create a master resume. So this is just going to be everything, all your skills, all your interests, all of your abilities, every job you've worked at, your salary history, all of that. And then you're going to create a tailored resume for this one job. So you have the job description. You're going to decide, are you doing chronological, functional, or combination? And then decide where you're going to save it. So as an example, in our career platform Handshake, we have an area called My Documents. So you can save it there as well as in the cloud. Make sure that you have multiple places you're saving things. And you can actually see the resume template at go.hawaii.edu, the number 8, the capital letter H, and the capital letter C. All right, let's talk about education. So the purpose is to show you meet the minimum qualifications. Again, it's going to be in reverse chronological order. So if you're currently at Kapiolani Community College, that should be at the very top. If you're planning to transfer, but you're not yet registered as a student in another university or college, do not include it. So your resume should only include what is current or previous. You should include your degrees from other countries. So we have a lot of international students that ask this question, and I say yes. If you have what is considered a bachelor's degree, you should definitely put it, or your master's or PhD or doctor, whatever degrees you have from other countries, definitely include it. And so it looks like this: the name of the institution, the city and state, or city and country, and what you're pursuing your degree in. So pursuing an AA degree in liberal arts. Expected graduation May 2026. Okay, so again, we're going to use the job description. You're going to tailor it, so you're going to provide either a selective work history or all of the jobs. You want to find out which experiences you have that are most relevant. So a good way to do this is to look at the job description, see what they're asking for, and make sure that you have that represented somewhere. So if they're asking for the ability to answer multiple phone lines and prioritize tasks, then when you're describing a job where you did that, you're going to say, answered multiple phone lines and able to prioritize tasks, right? You want to use the same words. You definitely should include all of your work experience. That includes volunteer experience, internships, and even working for the family. That is something that you can include as an experience. And then we're going to talk about accomplishments. So a lot of times under our work experience, we have our job duties, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that, but you want to consider maybe stepping it up a little, elevating it. And so that would be adding accomplishment statements. Again, you do not need to put your salary or your wage history on your resume, but sometimes, for example, in a federal resume, they want you to include it all. Okay, so here's an example of an accomplishment versus a duty. So a duty would be something like managed records according to FERPA and HIPAA regulations, right? So that's good, but it doesn't say if you created the system or if someone else already had it. So if you actually created the system and implemented it, you want to use that as the accomplishment statement. Created a system of record management for the office, right? Same thing with supervision, monitoring or managing others. You also want to include what your work is like. So do you work independently? You don't have to ask someone for permission to do everything. Or do you work directly under another person? And also, how have you contributed to the organization's mission through your work? So that's very important. A lot of companies and agencies are mission driven. So you can actually think about how you've contributed to your current organization's mission through your work. So we're going to take a look at this position. So the position that the student is applying for is office clerk. And in their resume, their duty is to help a high school teacher prepare for a class. Okay, so that's what they did. The skill that they used was copying, sorting, organizing paperwork, taking attendance, and grading papers. Okay, that's great. But an accomplishment statement actually goes through and names what they did in more detail. So, assisted Algebra 1 teacher with clerical duties, attendance and grading for 2 classes with 30 students each. So now you get a better idea. The clerical duties are all of the things above in the skills, except for attendance and grading. And then these are, this was over 2 classes. So it's not just a one-time thing. This is someone who's really really participated in helping this teacher. So in order to create these sentences, we want to use the SAR hashtag or SAR number sign model. It stands for situation, action, results, and measure, measure being the number or the quantity. S describes a situation that highlights the skill or the accomplishment that, of course, is relevant to the opportunity you are seeking. Whereas A talks about the action you took. So S, you're explaining a situation that occurred, and then A, you're saying, this is what I did, right? You want to start with a powerful verb. So an example, like I said, was created versus, created a filing system versus filed. R is going to be the result. So what was the impact? Again, we talked about what contributions did you make on your job? This is how you can say it. And then finally, you want to give some sort of a measure, some sort of a number or quantification. So in the example that I just shared, it was 2 classes of 30 students each. So let's think about this together. Organize a team to plan and implement an annual school fundraiser. That's a great skill and duty. But to change it, we're gonna use SAR. So coordinated efforts of 4 practicum teachers to plan an annual school fundraiser, which raised $15,000 more than the previous year. So the situation, they needed to coordinate 4 teachers to work together, and the action was to plan an annual school fundraiser. And actually, the action of coordination is also in there. The result was they raised money, and the quantification is they actually raised $15,000 more than the previous year. So this is a great example of an accomplishment statement. So it's your turn, all right? We're going to think about this together. So in class, you worked in a group of 4 students. You developed a 10-minute presentation about a topic related to the job you were applying for. So you're applying for a job, and hey, you have an example of doing what you're applying for in a work group at school. So your role was helping by editing the slides, and then everyone took turns presenting them, and your group received an A. So what is the situation here? The situation can be anything from, developing a presentation about a specific topic. The situation can be that you group work, maybe it's teamwork or group work that you want to show. So it could be either of those. The action is that you helped, right? You worked in a group, so that could be an action, but you also helped by editing the slides. And then you also presented along with everyone else. And the results we can see clearly is that your group received an A. So think about how you might write this sentence in a different way as an accomplishment statement. Let's use the job description to tailor your resume. When you're in your skills section, you want to use bullet points and short phrases, and you want to avoid listing personal characteristics. So oftentimes when I get a resume to review, it says things like dependable, trustworthy, diligent, honest. And what I tell folks is, you better be those things. Like, you're applying for a job, you should be honest, you should be punctual. And so those things should be taken for granted, that you come to the work setting with those personal characteristics. You want to just demonstrate that you meet the minimum qualifications. So that's going to be skills. Like, what are the actual things you can do? And you want to write the highest level. So when you're reading a resume, you're reading it left to right, top to bottom. So you want to put the highest level and the most valued skill at the top. So if all I read is your first bullet, that's what I'm getting. You need to include your language skills, so people forget that they can speak another language, even if you can only understand or you can only speak it, you can't read it or write it, that is still a skill. So include your level of proficiency and your technical skills. This is everything. So if there's specific hardware, machines, or equipment that you can use, operating systems, online applications and or software, everything that's relevant to the position you're applying for, including what level of proficiency you have. So if they're saying must be familiar with Microsoft Office applications, then you for sure will be putting that in your resume. And the strategy again, just look at the job description, make sure you're matching the words. So an optional section I mentioned previously is honors and awards, and the purpose is for you to show your accomplishments. So often folks forget, like, hey, they worked on a work group and they won an award, or maybe they played sports and they won a championship or something like that, best player or MVP. Those are the kinds of things that actually make a difference. So you want to put those in there. You might also want to include awards. So besides awards that I mentioned, it could be scholarships that are awards, programs where you're honored, those kinds of things. So think deeply about that. As with the rest of your resume, you want to assume that the reader doesn't know anything. And so the format is going to look like this. The name of the award, the group or organization you received it from, the dates or the date, and then if there's space, a brief description. And then you do it again. There is an optional section on your resume, which I tend to ask people to do a separate sheet, but you could include your references on your resume itself. The purpose is to provide the future employer with contact info for people that can not only verify your employment, but speak to your work skills and abilities. They don't have to talk about your character. So those things I talked about, like honesty and diligence, they don't have to give character references, but you want to find references that will give the strongest recommendation possible. You want to respect your references. So this means that you want to tell them every time you are applying for an opportunity, once they have agreed to be your reference, they should know that there's going to be more than one time that you will be using them on your resume. So every time you turn something in, you need to let them know. And every time you update your resume, please do give it to them. And I say this because as I've been an educator for over 25 years, and I'm still getting reference checks from students I worked with in 2003 to 2000, oh gosh, yeah, 2000 to 2003. And it's great, but they don't tell me. So here I am thinking, I have no idea what you're applying for. But I do just speak from the heart, and I always give a strong recommendation if I agree to be a reference. Here's what it looks like. So on a resume, you can put available upon request. You don't even need to include that if you don't have enough space. But again, I'm going to suggest a separate reference sheet. So this is what it looks like. You want to have 3 professional, not personal, but professional references who can speak to the quality of your work. You'll have their name and title, their current title, the organization name, and then the city and state or country if they're not in the city you're applying to. So you don't want to assume that the person knows what this company or organization or where they are. The person's phone number, their email, the number of years and months that you've known them, and how they know you. So again, they might have a different title, like I do. I have a different title from when I was working in 2000 to 2003. So relationship to you would be former supervisor while at blank. And again, make sure that your information is updated. So here's an example of the reference sheet that matches the resume. If you recall what the resume looked like, same paper, same header, and then professional references are here. And you can see an example there of what you could put. You want to use this rubric to review your resume and make sure that you're going to meet all of the criteria. And again, just like we talked about at the beginning, we want to make sure that the employer who's looking at this 30th resume would offer you an interview. We're going to move quickly to the cover letter. And again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can rewind, pause, do what you have to do, but you can always contact me for more information. So cover letter, folks are not usually aware of. This is typical for in the business world. Folks will ask for a cover letter that shows how you meet the education and experience for the position. So you're going to talk about, of course, identifying what you're applying to and how you got that job notice, and then your education experience, and then you're going to ask them to meet. So there's always a call to action in your cover letter. Your formatting should match your resume, just like your references page. And again, if the cover letter is not required, then what you're writing is going to be in an email. So the letter just goes into an email. So if you remember the previous resume, this is what it looks like. This is a cover letter. So we already checked formatting, language, and let's talk about the content. So the heading matches the resume. There's the date, which goes right under the heading. You have the address of the person that you're sending it to. Now, this one doesn't have it, but it is nice if you're able to put the name. So there might be a specific name that the job description refers you to. You can put it there. If you know the person's name also, it's great to put it there. So that's your salutation. Typically, we say something like, "Aloha, hiring manager," or "Dear selection committee." I like to avoid "to whom it may concern," but if you have to use that phrase, right? So the next area is the introductory paragraph. So this is where you identify what you're applying for, the name of the position, where, and how you got it. So recently posted to internal applicants, and then a why. So why are you interested? So they currently work at the school and they want to continue to grow there. Now here's an acronym, but they identify it here. All right. The first paragraph is your body paragraph number 1. It goes over your education and skills. So right up front, mentioning that they're finishing with their AS in business technology. And then they talk about the skills they gained through their program. All right. And then a positive statement. I'm able to apply these skills and knowledge in the program assistant position. Next, this one talks about their work experience and really their passion. So they want to do student education. So originally they wanted to be a teacher, but then when they worked with the A+ after school program and worked in a special ed class, they realized, nope, I want to work in a support role. So when I read that as a recruiter, I'm thinking, wow, this person really does want this job. They want to work in this role. They've worked in other roles. They know they don't want to do that. And then they talk about accomplishments. So they can assist in keeping teams running efficiently and helping the organization meet its mission. And here's the mission of providing a positive learning environment for students and staff alike. So if you mention the mission of the organization in your cover letter, to me, that's like an extra bonus point. Then finally, in closing, you're enclosing your resume. You'd be grateful for an opportunity to interview. So this is, hey, let's meet. Can you, I'd be grateful if you offer me an interview. And then you always repeat your contact information, even though it's up here, you always want to repeat it down here. And then you sign it. Now, if you can't sign it, you can use italics and put your name that way. If you're doing an email, then you would only include the salutation up to the conclusion. You don't need a signature because it's an email. And you don't need an address either. All right, so let's check your resume. What is the final check? Will you pass the 3-pile test? Is the font appropriate? How about balance? There's not too much white space. It's not squished. Can you read the text easily? Are all of the margins, indent spaces, and bullets consistent? So these should all be yeses. For language, did you use professional language and the best verbs to show action? How about your spelling? Did you spell manger instead of manager? Is your grammar correct? Do you have abbreviations that someone wouldn't recognize? And what about your tenses, present or past? And then finally, I want to use your own voice. So I do recommend that you use AI to help you to craft your resume and your cover letter to have great statements that have greatly spelled words and great grammar. However, as an example, if English isn't your first language, then you don't want to have something that sounds like you're a PhD, right? You have a PhD in English. You want to speak and use your own words. So I would never use the word indubitably. So you shouldn't use words in your documents that you would not use in your real life. Okay, so you want to make sure that this sounds like your own voice, even though we're using things like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your favorite is. You want to make sure it sounds like you and not a robot. And then for content, what about your objective or your professional summary? Do those demonstrate your expertise and your what you want to apply for? How about minimum education and number of years of work experience? Do you show that in your resume as well as previous work experience? And then finally, do you show that you have all of the things necessary that are related to the job description? Again, you want to check this and compare it to the job description. So that concludes this workshop. Really appreciate your time and attention. Here is my contact information. I'm at Kapi'olani Community College in the Iliahi building, 228. My email is there, and I prefer appointments through Star Balance. So the link there is go.hawaii.edu/capital E lowercase d lowercase b. And I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.